Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Sit back, get comfy, brew some hot chocolate as we are traveling to the frosty Graben Island. Graben Island, located in the treacherous Nocturnal Sea. This body of water lies to the west of the core, its cold waves lapping on the beaches below the western plateau. The weather on the sea is violent and erratic. Grey storm clouds constantly race across the sky, rumbling with lightning. Savage storms blowing freezing rain and sleet can whip up in an instant, battering ships mercilessly. Near islands, jagged shoals lurk beneath the waters, posing a deadly threat to all but the most experienced mariners. The perpetually overcast skies make navigation difficult for vessels without magnetic compasses. No sun, moon, or stars peek through to provide bearings, forcing sailors to navigate by sparse landmarks and instincts. Graben Island is the second largest island in the Sea of Sorrows. Its climate is cold and harsh. Chilly ocean winds torment all sides of the island during all seasons of the year. Seldom do conditions rise above freezing for more than 5 months a year, so residents claim they have but 2 seasons: snow and mud. The land is shrouded in mist nearly every evening, varying from a light haze to thick fog with low visibility. The island receives frequent, violent storms and is buried beneath many feet of snow in winter. While the climate is difficult to live in, the storms at least provide a steady source of fresh water. The village of Graben and the Graben family estate is contained in a bowl-like ravine where the river cuts through the bluff to reach to the ocean. On both sides of the river, the bluff slopes steadily upward until it reaches about 300-foot height. The northern end of the island is covered by rocky, rough terrain. Long, tough grass and some occasional hardy flowers grow in the hard soil. This part of the island is used for grazing sheep and goats. The land slopes gradually towards the southern end of the island. The midsection is covered by prairie, with long grass, tumbleweeds, shrubs and wildflowers. It is a home to a variety of small wildlife, so meat is not completely out of the menu. However, it is also considered dangerous due to the number of undead creatures calling this place home. The most hideous of them is known as the Flayed Rider. Grabenite tales of this fiend depicted as one of the restless dead, an unnamed horseman, hideously skinned alive by his foes, returned from the death maddened by the agony and driven to slaughter all who cross his path. Rare witnesses insist that Rider's torso has fused onto his steed's neck, melding the pair into an unnatural shape like the centaurs of myth. Talking about Graben, we cannot forget its sister island Totstain. It is located 60 miles east of Graben and is forever surrounded by icy storms. So no one is really known to ever have safely landed there. It appears to be little more than an ice-coated rocky knoll, but the looks can be deceiving. This is the island upon which Meredov, the former Darklord of Graben, and now the new Lord of the Nocturnal Sea, dwells. The island is an ingenious extrusion of an ancient, extinct volcano. This gives it a hard, stable base with about 20-foot layer of permafrost lying over it. Despite the extreme climate, the island is covered by pine forest, growing and thriving right in the permafrost. And all sorts of Arctic animals inhabit the place. The 2 mausoleums stand on the northern end of the island. They can be reached by following a snowy, narrow trail. And except for the mausoleums and trails, the island appears to be deceptively untouched by civilization. Graben Island is a home to 4 villages and ruled by a family of nobles who share the name with the isle. The largest settlement on the island is the village of Graben, which boasts about 1,000 people. The small communities are nearly self-sufficient, relying on fish, wild game and a few crops and furs for clothing. Local timber and stone are richly used for building materials. The walls of all the buildings are quite thick to keep out the winter cold. The residents of all the villages are quiet, slightly suspicious people. They compose a tightly knit group apprehensive of outsiders and strangers. They know their fellow villagers very well, and know the relatives and family trees of the neighbors as well as their own. The only exception I can recall is the village of Meredov, located on Namen Island. The inhabitants of this extremely isolated fishing community is not just apprehensive, but downright rude to the outsiders. Those people who I tried to communicate with replied in short grunts and sounds and were visibly relaxed when I was leaving. I cannot pinpoint what exactly had happened to these villages, but I am certain it has something to do with the old statuette of a sea god that they keep locked up in their only church. There isn't a lot of room for luxury, which leads the native of Graben Island to be primarily fishermen or sheep and goat farmers. while townsfolk work as weavers, millers, and wood spinners. The people of Graben work hard, but they make a reasonably comfortable living in their harsh environment. Everyone in the villages know the Graben family. They were the first settlers on the island and are descended from the jewel merchants. Most of the older Grabens keep to themselves, but the younger family members are seen in the village quite frequently, but all of them are considered bad luck. From time to time, the Grabens make acquaintances in the village, but this relationship never seemed to last long. The family midwife seemed to not be able to save a pregnant woman while she was giving birth. In another case, one of the Graben men courted one of the girls in town, but after her 2 brothers were mysteriously killed, the relationship ended. And I think telling you the story of the Darklord of this domain will explain why such a reputation is attributed to Grabens. Meredov lived in the world of Mystara. There, he was granted a barony of the Alfathian province of Norworld. Meredov was not much of a ruler. He accepted the land grant because he knew Norworld was a wild and untamed land, and assumed that he would be able to work on his spell research undisturbed. He settled on an island off the coast of his territory and ordered his retainers to deal with establishing suitable colonies for Alfathian immigrants. The first winter in Norworld was harsh, and Meredov lost many of his hirelings. However, it was a small matter to simply animate them and use them for clear-cut menial tasks. Meredov's chief retainer, however, objected to this, and was promptly killed to keep the matter quiet. As an increasing number of his assistants and immigrants arriving from Alfathia sought audiences with the Baron, Meredov found less and less time for his magical studies. He knew he could not kill everyone, so he devoted time to their concerns. However, what time remained for his research was devoted to a way to improve both retainers and colonists, so that they would not constantly bother him. In the dead of winter, 2 years after Meredov has been made a Baron of Norworld, he discovered a solution. It could not have come at a more opportune time, as the colonists were all on the verge of dying from starvation. So, he poisoned them all and made them into unique zombies that retained their former intellect while making them slavishly loyal to their master. The colony would continue to exist, but there was no need for food and no one would ever bother Meredov again. It was all the necromancer ever wanted. That same night, however, a violent storm raged, and when it cleared, Meredov found that his island sanctuary was no longer off the coast of Norworld. Instead, it had found itself a part of the Demiplane of Dread. Meredov did some exploring and found that his island existed in a body of water, with a handful of others to keep it company. Mists surrounded it all, and those mists prevented any escape. However, there were people living on nearby land that would serve nicely as test subject for his necromantic magic. After a century in the mists, Meredov was finally rewarded with rulership of the whole Nocturnal Sea. Luckily for us, Meredov has not yet realized that he can now draw test subjects from the many islands of the Nocturnal Sea and even the core. His attention remains focused on the islands of snowy Totstain, Graben and Namen. He has turned the noble family of Graben into undead, and they are presently his primary minions. Meredov has come to view life as an enormous experiment, and the living as those tests waiting to happen. He has no regard for value of life and considers all races to be nothing more than crops waiting to be harvested. His undead minions aid in this by abducting merchants who spend any time in Graben, and his own island of Totstain is riddled with a variety of traps set to catch those who manage to disturb him there. Thank you so much for your time, patient listeners. If throughout my stories you have ignored my warning, please listen to this one. If you value your life, avoid Graben Island. But for now, as always, be careful while crossing the mists.